Welcome to the many interpretations of Coelodonta, otherwise known as the woolly rhinoceros. The woolly rhino lived during the Pleistocene in Eurasia, and we actually have a very good idea of what these fellows looked like, and that's due to a combination of cave paintings being found as well as like exquisitely preserved sort of mummies of woolly rhinos being found, like they were found preserved in permafrost. So there's really not a lot of wiggle room present here. There's not a lot of depictions that took some creative liberties because they already have a good idea of what it looked like. It's the same song and dance as the mammoths that we've looked at before. So just full disclosure, a lot of these fellows will look pretty similar. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. So first of all, we have the Chauvet cave paintings, of course, located in France. So someone in my Discord said that I should have these because in a way, they're sort of like one of the first depictions of the woolly rhino. And I was like, I like the way you think. So I did that. Here it is. So you can see the woolly rhinos here. There's like a few of them present here. Again, this is one of the reasons why we have a good idea of the way that woolly rhinos looked. You'll notice that they do have two horns, a sort of pronounced hump, and a body that's pretty low to the ground. All things that are very true for the woolly rhino. So the stage has been set. We have our standard. We have our baseline. Let's get into the rest of them. Now, obviously, we can't forget about the most accurate depiction of the woolly rhinoceros. That is Unicorum verum. So yeah, this was like a 17th century like attempt at reconstructing like what were woolly rhino and mammoth bones, and they created this interesting creature. It was like 17th or 18th century. It was like, you know, one of those times. Let's get into it. After that is 50 million years ago. We have a brief little appearance of the woolly rhino right here. This one looks very different from the later ones that we see. It's fairly outdated. It does have relatively small horns. Of course, that could just be something that would be chalked up to individual variation. The horns would probably vary in size. The head does very much look like a rhino head, though woolly rhinos do have like longer heads than modern day rhinos do. Oh, also, I should set this standard too. The closest living relative of the woolly rhino is the Sumatran rhino. I might as well mention that part too. It is also portrayed with wool. Of course, it was a woolly animal. In fact, they actually had two layers of wool. One layer would shed when it was getting into the warmer months, you know, to help the animal cool off. And of course, once you got into the cooler months, it would get that extra layer back to help it warm up. Next up is Journey to the Beginning of Time. And this is where we start to get into our more modern, like kind of like baseline up-to-date reconstructions, because they're not going to change much from this point on. So you have these two huge animals, which, yeah, they were big animals. They were pretty much comparable in size to the white rhinoceros, which is pretty hefty. With these massive horns, of course, the horn that's closer to the edge of the snout is longer than the one that's closer to the eyes. That is very much true for the woolly rhino, and they do have their wool, and you can see the pronounced hump right here, which I don't think was present on the previous depiction. So that kind of sets the stage right there. After that, we have Land of the Mammoth, and this is where I start to realize when I was making this that the woolly rhino doesn't really get center stage at all. It's mostly like a background character, so to speak. It's mostly something that's present to say, hey, this animal existed too. But that's like in documentaries where the main focus is either like mammoths or big cats or humans. The woolly rhino never really gets the spotlight. That's a bit unfortunate because rhinos are incredibly awesome, and it would be really cool if we talked a little bit more about their diversity and you know, just rhinos in general, especially modern day rhinos, which a lot of them are incredibly threatened, which is of course never a good thing. But anyway, here's what it looks like. It's not the best quality image out there, but this is like the best look I can get at its overall skeletal structure. Everything seems to match up aside from the fact that it doesn't really have a pronounced hump. As I mentioned before, it did have a hump in between the shoulders, which is something that would help support its massive horns on the nasal portion of its head. But it is woolly. It's got like the proper rhino shape. It looks pretty good. Next up is Walking with Beasts. Now, the thing that stands out the most to me about this one is the way that they shaped its horns. So of course, horns nowadays, they do mostly have like a bony core, that's like the main structure of the horn. But horns are usually mostly made out of keratin, which is like the same material that makes up our fingernails. That keratin like grows in a bunch of layers, and it makes the horns larger than what the bony core would suggest. In a lot of instances, that keratin can grow in some like huge ways. It can grow in very strange shaped ways. Like there's a lot of rhinos today where you see them with very interestingly shaped horns. They're not always uniform. They're not always like a perfect cone shape or something like that. And that seems to be how they portrayed this woolly rhino right here. It kind of looks like that horn is not exactly a perfect shape. It kind of looks like it was growing in a very interesting direction, especially the smaller horn. That's awesome. You know, that's a great way to portray it, and it makes it feel like it's more of like an actual animal rather than something that was designed. Like, it just so happens to be that the animal that you managed to film is one that has a little bit more of a misshapen horn. That just looks really cool. And on top of that, everything else looks really good as well. It's got the hump, it's got the wool, and it's got relatively short legs. It's pretty low to the ground. So that's a very good depiction. It's probably one of my favorites so far. Next up is Ice Age Giants. So we have this fella right here that also looks pretty good. It is portrayed with like a lighter brown, kind of like blonde coloration fur. Most of the other ones we've seen are darker, and that actually seems to line up. It seems like adults would have had darker fur, while the young individuals would have had lighter fur. So it's something that they kind of grew into, like a darker coloration. And of course, that's something that we can tell from like the very well preserved animals that have been found in permafrost. This fella seems to be a little bit lighter, which doesn't really match up to what we have observed. However, of course, individual variation is usually a factor. And, you know, sometimes with animals like that, they will get like slightly different colors from each other. So it's not really the biggest note out there. I just wanted an excuse to talk about the colors of them, I guess. Also, it could be the way that the light's hitting it. So there's also that. But it looks really good. The whole skeletal structure matches up. The horns look great. Looks like a good depiction. Same can also be said for Out of the Cradle. Really not much else I could say. You get a really good close-up of its face, and they have like a sort of squared off lip. That's also true. They had a squared off snout. Yeah, everything else seems to match up pretty well. So yet another good depiction. They have another brief appearance in Alpha. There's like a group of them sort of walking around with a ton of fur and absolutely huge horns. Again, the horns could be a product of individual variation, as the way that keratin grow would not really follow a set plan. You know, it'd probably grow in all kinds of different ways. Some of them could have been large, some of them could have been small, some of them could have been misshapen. The sky's the limit in terms of that, I suppose. We don't really get to see much of them. It's just like a drone shot of them as they're walking by. Not much else I can say. They are also background characters in Age of Big Cats. Everything does seem to match up here. Once again, though, they are mostly portrayed as just animals in the back, something that adds to the diverse fauna of this ecosystem. In fact, the scene in which they show up in kind of reminds me of like a Mauricio Anton piece of art. It's kind of uncanny, really. But I haven't really mentioned this either. They did live on the mammoth steppe, which is this large environment that, of course, mammoths lived on that had like a lot of grassland and stuff like that, something that doesn't really exist today. There is also La Brea. These guys look great. Something I could say about La Brea is that they typically had pretty good animal designs. Like even their Spinosaurus looked fantastic. But this is what they look like. The skeletal structure matches up. The fur looks great. Kind of looks like they did shed that like extra layer, given the fact that they are in a warmer environment. So that makes sense. Skull looks great. The horns look great. Only thing I'll really say is that they seem to be oversized by quite a bit. Like they're portrayed as being enormous here. But other than that, everything else very much looks like a Coelodonta. We'll go ahead and move on to the video game, starting off with Carnivore's Ice Age. It looks good. You know, there's not much I can say about it because it doesn't really do anything that's too incredibly different. It does have the hump. It does have the horns. It's pretty thin. That's mostly due to the graphics. You know, it does have its woolly fur and all that. It's just, yeah, it looks good. You know, it looks pretty good. Zoo Tycoon has these fellows right here that seem to have like very interesting colors, like they like more of like a white face, which is in heavy contrast to the brown body. So that's different, and that's really cool to see. And then Zoo Tycoon doesn't really do anything too crazy, although it kind of seems like they either have like different colored fur, or maybe they have like kind of patches of fur where fur is not present. Either way, it looks pretty darn good. Still looks like a woolly rhino. In Jurassic World, the game, level 1 looks pretty standard. It looks how you'd expect it to. But then level 40, it's got armor and 3 horns instead of the traditional 2. All right, let's move on. Jurassic World Alive basically has the same design as like the level 1 Jurassic World the game. World of Warcraft has this fella that was very clearly inspired from the woolly rhino. In fact, it's called the woolly white rhino. It's got like more of a white coloration, a huge horn, and also these kind of like little spikes or horns on the rest of its head. It does have a hump as well, but it's just a lot of exaggerated features because it's like a stylized version. It's very cool. Far Cry Primal has this fella right here that looks pretty interesting. It's got an interesting looking face. I'll certainly say that. Everything else seems to match up to what you would probably expect. And then Ark also has a good one. Really not much difference in this and what we've seen in many other documentaries and stuff. It looks good. It looks great even. Then next up we have the amazing prehistoric kingdom, and you know what's cool about that is that we do have ontogeny in this game now, so we can like see them grow from this small little dude right here all the way up until this one. And it looks like there is some variation in the colors as well, which is pretty cool. Again, you know, the colors could be something that would be chalked up to variation because, of course, these all do represent the same species. That species being Antiquitatus, which I believe is actually the only species that we know of. Yeah, let's get some of these guys in here. There they are right here. We got the baby little Coelodonta right here, which, of course, that does certainly match up because, of course, we do have them preserved. And we have the adult right here, which also looks fantastic. This is a good way to get like a really good close look at these fellas. But yeah, no, Coelodonta or the woolly rhino is very low to the ground. It does have relatively short legs. It is covered in wool, hence the name woolly rhino. And it does have these two nasal horns right here. One is a lot closer to the eyes and one is like really far up on the snout. I like the way that it curves like this. Like again, similar to the walking with beasts one. It kind of seems like it, you know, the keratin kind of grows in some interesting ways. And also the head does seem to be relatively long, longer than modern day rhino heads. And the hump is, of course, present here as well. A very good design, you know, very fantastic design, if you ask me. Prehistoric kingdom never goes... Prehistoric kingdom never goes wrong. Look at the way they run, too. Animations are fantastic, and yeah, no, this is just this is probably, you know, up there with my favorites, though it is very consistent with pretty much like most of the other designs that we've seen. Again, there's really not a lot of wiggle room for creative liberties, I suppose, when it comes to Coelodonta, because again, we know a lot about it. But yeah, that's Prehistoric Kingdom. We also do have a couple of honorable mentions that I wanted to bring in here. Like from one of biology's books, the 1974 Ladybird Dinosaur book, it has this fella right here, which everything seems to match up to most of our modern day reconstructions. It's just in that classic paleo art style, which I absolutely love. And of course, there's the very interesting and awesome, weird and wild art that, yeah, I mean, you know, it's something. It's something. It's everything seems to match up. Maybe if anything, the horn that's closest to the mouth is a little bit too far back, but other than that, everything looks great. So yeah, there we have it. Those are the depictions of the woolly rhino, the second ever rhinoceros that we have done in this series. Of course, Elasmotherium was the first, and we have done a rhino relative, that being Paraceratherium. Very cool. You know, most of them looked very similar to each other, which is not really a bad thing. It just shows that we know a lot about the woolly rhino, and we know, like, especially in terms of its general appearance. Just like the mammoths, you know, the fact that there's not a lot of wiggle room just is a testament to, you know, how much we realistically know about them. And considering the fact that a lot of these were documentaries, that certainly makes sense that that was the case. Of course, there was a lot of things that didn't make the cut because, again, most of them just look similar. So if I didn't include anything, then be sure to discuss those down below in the comments. But yeah, those are the ones that I included. I really do hope you guys enjoyed this video. Small little update, I have done some changes to my Patreon. Now for as little as $1 a month, you'll gain access to weekly videos that are exclusive to Patreon. If that's something that you're interested in and you want to help support me and the channel, the link for that is down below. There's also, of course, the channel membership, which gains you access to videos earlier than everybody else, which I think is pretty cool. I do appreciate all of your support. You guys are all awesome. And if you like dinosaur and prehistoric related content, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you on board. But until next time, thank you guys so much for watching and have an awesome day.